Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and I'm just pumped because I get a chance to finally talk again to my homegirl, Miss Yvette Carnell, who is we haven't done anything together in a while on video, Yvette, and I just felt like that's like a travesty. Would you agree? But we've been
I
busy. We've been busy. You're a busy woman. You killing it over in Breaking Brown, and I'm doing my thing wherever I'm doing my thing at. And it's like, and I felt like there, I don't know. We were just off doing our own stuff, and I hit you up, and I was like, okay, we got to talk. We have to talk. And I think that this was the best time to talk because you're like causing trouble. See, people, that's your problem, Yvette. If you would just make people like you,
yeah.
you
I'm
would
not a
be
charmer, I
you
guess.
could
I
be
don't
on
know.
MSNBC, but you keep on making people mad.
I mess up.
Yeah, and so I saw that you did this article where you were kind of referencing Vice, where they did an interview with a lady named Kristal High. I didn't know much about Kristal, but Kristal High, who runs a blog called Politic 365, not politics, politic,
Hmm.
and you kind of pointed something out that kind of reflected a conflict of interest that almost that really put their platform in a bad light. I would definitely say that. Can you tell me more about it?
Well, she did an interview for a show and basically admitted that she was being paid by the Miss High, that she was being paid by this lobbying group, that they funded, her, but tried to paint it in the sense that that still doesn't necessarily mean that there's a conflict of interest or that she is, writing for them. So in my mind, though, that does present a conflict of interest, especially if this is not something that most of your readers are aware of. So I wrote about it and I said basically, this person's a hack. This person has basically been out in front in these sort of anti-net neutrality sort of things, and without telling anybody, hey, by the way, everybody, I get money from these people.
Hmm. Interesting. So what you're saying is that, and it looks like this firm is called DCI. So you're saying that, and you didn't, you're not, it's not like you were digging up information trying to make somebody look bad, making things up. I mean, this was actually reported on Vice,
Yeah.
which is a white-owned, more I guess you could say maybe more mainstream organization. Even though they're not really mainstream, they really do a lot of really interesting stuff. They hit the stories that nobody else hits. That's why I love Vice. And you're saying that Vice basically they interview Kristal and
Hmm. Yeah.
the host of their show, and I don't know if they were trying to set them up or not, but it looks like their host David Pakman did an interview. Let's see, with Kristal High and another guest, Everett Elric or Ehrlich, sorry, and he mentioned you were pitched to the show, or they were pitched to the show by DCI. So
Yes.
DCI, apparently, this lobbying firm, is pretty actively engaged, apparently, in their media presence and in the shaping of perhaps the shaping of their message. I mean,
Apparently.
maybe it's a possibility that they're saying, look, we're going to do all these things for you, get you on all these shows, and we don't care what you say. You can say whatever you want because we just love you that much. But we don't, most lobbying firms don't get paid to just put people out there to say what they want. Lobbying firms get paid to lobby, right? So therefore, you're receiving money from a lobbying firm. You would argue that there's a good chance that you're probably being paid to help them achieve their goal. Am I am I off base on
You're
this?
perfectly right. Lobbying firms are paid to influence. That's what they do. That is their business. Exactly right.
Mm. Okay, and so the way she defended herself, and I think that it's important to make sure that that her point of view gets out there. And I want people to go to Breaking Brown to kind of read the article so they can see all the points of view. Now, I
Mhm.
noticed that they wrote an open letter to you, which we'll talk about in a second, and they said, well, we're deliberately not linking to Yvette's article because we don't want to contribute to the propaganda machine, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's a problem because effectively what you're doing is you're proving her right. When you say to people, I don't even want you to see the other point of view because all I want to do is give you my point of view. Well, I mean, that's propaganda. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, however you want to slice it, when you don't let people make their own decision, you don't give them all the information, then you're effectively, asking them to take your word for it and not listen to anybody else. So the way she defended herself is she said, I think you have to really consider what it is you're suggesting, or sorry, what it is you're suggesting you're asking here. So she I guess became defensive when the guy asked her, are individuals like you and Everett Ulrich, are you paid by DCI? And she said, if people are working on different issues, there could be, say, a consulting arrangement that's separate and apart from whatever it is people are advocating for. So maybe she's arguing that, look, I wasn't hired by them to help advocate for the things that they believe in. They're not paying me to promote the things they believe in, which is a little bit shaky, right? I don't typically pay somebody to advocate for a point of view that's not consistent with what I believe in, right? But but it sounds like she's saying it's consulting, that I just consult with them, and it doesn't look like she gave the nature of the consultancy. Now Packman went on and he said, in other words, DCI may be paying you as a consultant, but they're not paying you for the media appearances or being a spokesperson for the point of view that their clients espouse. And she said, right. And it is interesting. It's almost like he asked this question to just make her look kind of silly. I mean, is that what you kind of gathered?
Well, what do you mean? Like, if you look at, like, she's writing about net neutrality. Every big telecom company right now is talking, worrying, lobbying for net neutrality. So the idea that, well, I'm just kind of here. I get paid as a consultant. Consultant to do what? Are you saying that you do other things outside of, Politic 365? Are you saying that you do other things outside of that they're paying you for? And if so, I don't understand why she didn't expound on that. But the truth of the matter is, why would you, as this media personality, be doing this, accepting money from a group when we have this hot button issue, without somewhere saying in the article or in a disclaimer somewhere and saying, hey, I work for these people. This is about like an advertisement. This is what I do. So when you do that, then there's a problem.
Interesting. Well, it is kind of ironic that they are writing about net neutrality, and it seems that they, based on what I've seen, they're taking the position that major corporations are taking, not the position of independent media outlets or African American media outlets, which tend to be smaller. And I'm looking here to try to see what they have to say about it, but here we go. So it looks like they did some interviews with Roland Martin and some other people about net neutrality, which I won't go into now because I haven't had a chance to really research everything that they've said. Have you had a chance to see what they're writing about net neutrality?
Yeah, it doesn't seem that they're pro net neutrality at all. Actually, it sounds a little anti net neutrality to me, and that's a problem. And it's a problem. Listen, I know you haven't really gotten into the defense of the open letter that was written by someone else at Politic 365, which was basically a slander at me, as opposed to really discussing their issue and the role they played. But it is a problem to me for a black outlet that does black politics to be accepting outside lobbying money and writing anything about net neutrality, writing anything about telecom without saying, hey, we get some of this telecom money. We get some of this lobbying firm money. These people, we're kind of in the pocket too. So you should know that. And in the letter, the woman actually says, well, anybody who has researched us knows that how we were kind of put together and how we came about. And I'm thinking to myself, nobody in your viewership, how many people who read you know that? How many people who actually read you understand that? Nobody, because you don't put it out there out front. You just have it kind of hidden away, and then when something blows up in your face, you're like, well, people should know how we came about. People should know how, we came to be. No. And why are you getting upset at me for telling people if you assume they already know it? Because I said she's a hack? Well, that's my opinion. Just like in the article, she said, well, Miss High writes opinion articles. Well, so do I, and this is my opinion.
Interesting. Well, I agree. Well, when you get to this idea of African American media outlets, particularly on the internet, kind of being bought and paid for, I think that's a consistent theme. I mean, Negroes come cheap in a lot of cases, and not black people don't come cheap, but Negroes come cheap. And, I say that because, we don't have a lot of wealth in our community, yet we're very materialistic. We judge the status of each other based on how much money you have, how much power you have in white mainstream media or white mainstream corporate America, whatever the case may be. So, it's not that hard for people to come in and do what Donald Sterling did and basically buy the NAACP. Corporations all across the country buy the NAACP. It's not that hard for you to buy a blogger and say, hey, we're going to support you and we want you to we're not going to tell you what to say, but you understand what it is. You know what I mean? Like that man, buying that woman that fancy car or whatever, that big house. they know what the relationship is. They don't even have to say it. It doesn't have to be verbalized. But you know that you cross that person who has done these things for you, then you're going to lose out. And I'm reading one of the interviews that Kristal did with Roland Martin, and it's very clear that she's defending the corporate side of net neutrality. I think Roland actually made the point. Roland actually asked her. He said, ending net neutrality. He said it messes up that young entrepreneur, that African American that wants to start an online network. This makes it a lot more difficult, right? And she says, no, not at all. And then she goes into trying to basically make the same argument that people have always made when they want corporations to be deregulated, which is, oh no, the FCC is going to regulate that. They're still the cop on the beat, as she calls it. They're going to make sure everything remains fair. Well, we know that's bullshit. Yeah. We know that doesn't happen. That doesn't
the same
work.
way the Fed makes sure the stock market remains fair is how they're going to make sure everything remains fair. That's how everything remains fair, and that's why I was so. And part of I'm happy you brought that up because that's why I was so annoyed by the open letter that Ms. Burke wrote earlier today. In terms of Yvette should do her job as a journalist. Well, first of all, I've never said I'm a journalist. I'm a writer, and I'm very biased. I advocate for people. I advocate for minorities. I advocate for people, the underdog. That's what I do. So if you think that I am in this space as a journalist, then you didn't do your research before you came at me, and that's your first mistake. But the second thing I would say is that as a journalist, this woman shouldn't have been taking money from someone and then writing as if she was independent. So before you give me a lesson on journalism, you might want to go back to J school yourself and try to understand why that's unethical, why that doesn't pass muster. And until you do that, I don't see how you can basically, hold me to account. It doesn't really make sense. And there was just so much in that open letter. She said at one point, she said, well, Yvette wrote about the CBC or something like that. And she never called the CBC. She never called these people. And well, there's a little thing called the congressional record. There's a little thing, you have positions that I can see, based on what you've done, based on your votes, based on, other reporting. I know what you're guilty of. Just like I don't have to call Miss High and ask her questions because she admitted to this during an interview in her own words. So please don't threaten me and say, well, you could be sued. This could get you sued. No, it couldn't be sued. I can't be sued for printing something that someone has admitted during an interview. This is something that she said. And yes, I give my opinion of it. That's what I do. So it's amazing to me that Ms. Burke will defend Ms. High in her opinion. But when Yvette has an opinion, that's a problem. And she can't see the contradiction in that. That's a problem for me. That's a problem. That should be a problem for Politic 365.
Well, it's yeah. I think you'd be right to ask that question. If she were a journalist for USA Today or CNN, and CNN found out she was being paid by a lobbying group, and then gave opinions that happened to favor the opinion or to be consistent with the opinions of the lobbying group. I would doubt that they'd keep her employed with that company.
Let's be honest. When I tried to quote, some of her articles, Miss High's articles in my article, and I went to the Huffington Post and learned that they had taken down her stuff because there was a conflict of interest. So obviously Huffington Post didn't know it either. So you can't come at me and say, well, everybody already knows our connection to media. No, they don't. Even Huffington Post didn't know it, or they wouldn't have pulled her stuff. So what are you saying? They pulled her stuff because there's an obvious conflict of interest, that you're basically a lobbyist. And if you're a lobbyist, you should go on TV with that lobbying firm below your name so people know who you actually represent. That's just plain. And to me, if you don't do that, to me, you are a hack. If you don't do that, if you don't let people know, hey, I am being paid by these people to present a point of view, and here's the point of view that they want you to understand and to really engage, that's fine. If you're a lobbyist and you come to me with that opinion, I have no problem with that because I know who you're working for. I know what the agenda is, and I can make my own decisions. When you don't do that, I think there's big business trying to influence African Americans by a sleight of hand without showing that, hey, look, African Americans, this person works for this person, instead of like, oh, this is a blogger who's just trying to do the right thing. No, I think we deserve the truth, and I don't understand why that's a problem.
Well, I agree. I mean, I think that the truth means giving people information, letting them make their own decision. And I think just the fact that they wouldn't link back to what you originally wrote is a problem. But then there's also the interesting fact that they came after you and another person, Lee Fang. I don't know who Lee Fang is, but I'm like, well, what about? I mean, does Lee Fang work for Vice? I mean, why didn't they say anything about Vice? Why didn't they say anything about Huffington Post or these other places? I mean, why would they pick you when they've got these bigger fish out there that have also said the same thing? I mean, you wouldn't have even written what you wrote had Vice not done their due diligence in terms of digging in and asking that difficult question.
No, and here's the thing. Here's the kicker. The only thing she said in the open letter was, "Well, we contacted Vice, we contacted the Raw Story, we contacted Yvette Carnell, and the only people who responded were the Raw Story." Well, what did the Raw Story say to you? And why didn't you write an open letter to Vice? Why did you only write an open letter to me? Because you only want to take on people. You're only willing to confront people within the African American community. You want to paint this as sort of one black outlet versus another black outlet, or one black person versus another black person. When no, that's not the issue. The issue is ethics, and the issue is whether or not it was unethical for this person to present this issue as just her opinion as someone who had thoroughly researched the subject, or whether or not she should have disclosed that, hey, I am working for these people. I get a check. That's part of how I eat. So the issue is not black and white here, but she wants to make it into that. And towards the end of the article, she really just puts all of her cards on the table and says, this is just, Yvette and other people trying to determine what is and what is not a sellout and this sort of black, Negro meme. And it has nothing to do with black, or it has nothing to do with African American even. It has to do with the fact of whether or not, the question of whether or not it is ethical for you to present this idea without putting it out there full-throatedly, not, well, if you could research and figure this out, full-throatedly, that you are working for these people. So, yes, it is my opinion, if you don't do that, you're a hack, and that's a sham, and I stand by that.
Mm. I don't disagree. I mean, I think that it's, interesting, when you talk about people, people kind of being paid. I'm trying to make sure I get my thought right here. Um, you know, it's interesting how in our community we have people that are basically what you might call Negro brokers, right? They work with mainstream America. They work with white America particularly, but not just white America. It might be wealthy America, whatever you want to call it, corporate America. And their job is to kind of control black people, control their thinking, control their actions, right? And in this particular case, I mean, what I really see is a situation where, she's being paid to what I believe to support or promote net neutrality, particularly within the African
Anti-net
American
neutrality,
community.
really.
Sorry, you know what I mean. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the other way. And to also really squash dissent, right? To kind of deal with anybody in the black community who might speak up or stand up or try to say something that is not consistent with what this company wants or what this lobbying firm wants, right? And so that's what I kind of see here, and I think it's unfortunate because I think that what it does is it deviates from the simple idea of letting black people make their own decisions. And I think that that's what I appreciate about your point of view the most is that even though you will advocate for a particular perspective, you will still come back and say, well, here's all the information, make your own decision, think for yourself. And then, as you mentioned, you're not a journalist. You're not trying to be a journalist. You're an advocate, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think there's nothing wrong with her being an advocate as long as you reveal, where your bias is coming from. You can't just sort of say, well, I just really support, killing net neutrality, and not sort of let people know, like, the part of the reason you're saying this is because you're being paid. Because I guarantee you that if they were paying her to say something different, she'd be saying something different. So that, to some extent, might make her a corporate/political puppet.
Yeah, and when you get to the end of the open letter, she says something basically to the effect of, this is just clickbait. And I hate that sort of thing where like seasoned or quote unquote seasoned journalists, diminish other writers because, well, you didn't go to J school with me, and I hang out at the Hill. I used to work on the Hill too. Boo hoo, whoop de doo. And I just, this, but to diminish me as a person and not really go into what I said. Notice that during that whole open letter, she never really addressed the payments, addressed how much Miss High was making, addressed how much Politic 365 had brought in over the past few years from that organization. You never really addressed the crux of it. The only thing you really did was try to bring it in and say, let me diminish Yvette and just say she's writing clickbait. And so you shouldn't pay attention to her. But you never addressed the issue. And the truth of the matter is, it's not some sort of clickbait. That's not what I do. And anybody who knows what I do knows that, I would probably be doing much better if I was just throwing out clickbait. But if you want to accuse me, that is fine. I would rather be a person who, everyone who knows me and knows what I do knows that I'm not receiving a check from anybody from the outside, in terms of pushing me to write in a certain direction. So that's what I want people to know is that, hey, no matter what you feel about me, we can disagree, but you can trust me. You can't trust these people. And you haven't made it easier to be trusted because you didn't address the issues in your article. The only thing you did was go at me and one other person and say, look at them. They're just bloggers. They don't know what they're doing. They're armchair professionals. And you didn't address it. And that says more to me than anything else that you didn't address the crux issue.
Hmm. I agree. I mean, I say address the issue or don't address it at all, or don't talk about anything because, you know, it is funny though. It's I've seen that before. I've seen where people didn't like something that I said and they said, "Oh, he's just writing this for clickbait." And I'm like, "Okay, so let's pretend like I am." Okay, but are you going to deal with the issue, or are you going to somehow make the conclusion that because you believe that this article was clickbait, that there are no legitimate points there? I mean, I was in school from the age of 18 to the age of 31. I get a lot of education. I know a whole lot of shit. So if I share facts and thoughts and information and ideas, and you somehow want to diminish that because you think it's clickbait, that tells me you don't have a leg to stand on. You don't really have an argument.
No.
And it's and it even reminds me of when back when Cornel West was expressing his concerns about the Obama administration, and I think that somebody concocted this BS about inauguration tickets. Well, he's just mad because he didn't get inauguration tickets. Okay, let's assume that he was. Let's assume that's what it was. In fact, I talked to Cornell and I asked him about that, and he said, "Yeah, I was really mad that my mama didn't get to go see the president get inaugurated because she loved Obama." So he admitted it. So I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, but let's assume that's the case. So you're saying that this man, that everything he stands for, everything he believes in, can be just washed away with that one argument? Are you kidding
Yeah.
me? I mean, that's just the most uh, that's the tiniest, most one-dimensional, pathetic line of thinking that I can imagine. And so, but then again, that's a tell-all sign that the person really doesn't have actual substance to defend their point of view. They're just good at working in the space of politics where you can write somebody off with one statement that you believe or that others might believe diminishes their credibility, and you don't have to deal with everything else that they said, right?
Yeah, it's
Um,
a deflection tool. I see it used all the time. There are all sorts of tools used to deflect away from the central issue. And it's just one deflection tool in the big, toolbox of things that people use to move attention away from the central issue, which is why is this person taking money from this group and not disclosing that, to, well, look, Yvette's the real hack here. You know what I mean? I went to J school and I know that Yvette's the real hack here. This is armchair stuff, so it's just a tool. It's a tired tool. I've seen it since 2009, when I first started, writing about Obama. So I'm used to it. I just hope that people can see past it.
Absolutely. Well, let's hope. Well, I'll tell you what. I support net neutrality. I think that people have to understand that there is a huge campaign, a huge amount of money being put into propaganda related to net neutrality and getting us to do what we've been convinced to do in the past, which is to support corporate interests over our own. Most of our political leaders have been bought out. That's just a fundamental fact. And you've got to dig around and get all the information. You cannot listen to a lot of these outlets. Even half the black media outlets. You could, if you really follow the money, look at who's funding them. You can see that their agenda is entirely inconsistent with the agenda of the black community. So we got to fight against that. So thanks, Yvette, for
Thank you.
being a fellow soldier. I respect you. And thank you all for checking us out at yourblackworld.net. And until we meet again, please be strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.